I thought our divorce would be tough, but manageable, something we could work through for the sake of our kids. I never expected my ex to stoop so low, to twist the truth and use our children as pawns in a courtroom battle. But when her lies began to unravel, the judge exposed everything in the most dramatic way, leaving everyone stunned. Our marriage had been hanging by a thread for years, but I convinced myself that Sarah and I could make it work, for the kids if nothing else. There were good moments, sure. 10 years together meant shared memories, family vacations, and holidays where we actually felt like a team. But those moments became fewer and farther between as the cracks in our relationship deepened. The final blow came when I discovered Sarah had been hiding a massive amount of debt from me. Credit card bills, payday loans, thousands of dollars I knew nothing about until I stumbled across a statement tucked into her purse. When I confronted her, she brushed it off, saying she didn't want to stress me out and promising she'd handle it. But it wasn't just the debt that hurt. It was the lies, the secrecy, and the realization that she didn't trust me enough to be honest. Our arguments became more explosive after that. Every conversation felt like a landmine waiting to go off. After months of this toxic back and forth, we both agreed it was time to end things. It wasn't a decision I took lightly, but I knew staying together would do more harm than good, for us and for our kids. When we sat Max and Lily down to tell them, it was one of the hardest conversations of my life. Max, at 8, was old enough to grasp what was happening, and the disappointment in his eyes was heartbreaking. Lily, who was only 6, didn't fully understand but cried anyway, clinging to me as if letting go would make everything fall apart. "We both love you so much," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That will never change. We're still a family, just in a different way." Sarah chimed in, adding, "We'll make sure you see both of us all the time. We're going to work together to make this as easy as possible for you." In that moment, I believed her. Despite everything, I thought we could at least come together for the kids. For the first few weeks, it seemed like we were on the same page. We agreed to split custody evenly and try to keep things civil. I was hopeful we could avoid the messy fights I'd seen other divorced couples go through. Sarah even suggested we go to mediation instead of letting lawyers handle everything. But that hope was short-lived. The moment the lawyers entered the picture, everything changed. Sarah became cold, combative, and alarmingly strategic. She started making demands I'd never agreed to, like primary custody and spousal support, even though we both worked full-time during the marriage. It felt like I was dealing with a stranger. The woman who once promised we'd put the kids first was now trying to strip me of my rights as a father. At first, I thought it was just the stress of the situation getting to her. But as the weeks went on, it became clear that Sarah wasn't just looking for a clean break. She was preparing for war. The first red flag came when Sarah's lawyer sent over a proposed custody arrangement. The document outlined a schedule that gave her nearly full custody of Max and Lily, leaving me with only a few weekend visits each month. I stared at the paper in disbelief. Was this a mistake? Surely Sarah knew how involved I'd always been in their lives. Max's soccer team would never have had a coach if it weren't for me stepping up. I'd spent countless evenings helping Lily perfect her latest art project or cheering her on at her school recitals. The idea of being reduced to a part-time father wasn't just unfair. It was unthinkable. I refused to accept it. My lawyer submitted a counterproposal for joint custody, emphasizing my active role in the kids' lives. That's when things started to spiral. Sarah, who had once promised to work with me for the sake of our children, suddenly became hostile, her lawyer firing back with accusations that felt like they'd come out of nowhere. At first, Sarah's claims were subtle. Her lawyer argued that I worked too much and couldn't provide the stability the kids needed. I countered with evidence showing my consistent involvement. Photos from Max's games, messages from Lily's teachers thanking me for volunteering at school events. But Sarah wasn't done. Her accusations escalated. She claimed I had a temper, that I was unpredictable and prone to yelling in front of the kids. He creates a tense, unsafe environment, her lawyer argued in court, casting me as a volatile presence in Max and Lily's lives. Hearing those words was like being punched in the gut. The accusations weren't just untrue. They were the exact opposite of who I was as a parent. I'd always gone out of my way to shield Max and Lily from the tension between Sarah and me, keeping our arguments private and ensuring their home life felt as normal as possible. I couldn't understand why Sarah was doing this. Was it desperation? Spite? Or was she genuinely convinced that cutting me out of the kids' lives was in their best interest? Whatever the reason, I knew I had to fight back, not just for myself, but for Max and Lily. I started gathering every piece of evidence I could find to disprove her claims. I compiled emails, texts, and even school newsletters that mentioned my involvement. My lawyer also suggested reaching out to people who could speak to my character as a father. It wasn't easy asking for help, but I knew I needed it. Max's soccer coach agreed to write a letter about my commitment to the team, and Lily's teacher sent a glowing note about how involved I'd been in her education. Even mutual friends who had witnessed my parenting firsthand offered to testify if needed. But no matter how much evidence I gathered, I couldn't shake the fear that Sarah's lies would overshadow the truth. She wasn't just trying to win, she was trying to destroy me. One day, after another grueling court session, I confronted her in the hallway. "Why are you doing this, Sarah?" I asked, my voice filled with frustration and hurt. "What happened to putting the kids first?" She looked at me, her expression cold and unyielding. "I am putting them first," she said. "They need stability, and that means being with me." Her words felt hollow, but I could see the determination in her eyes. Sarah was willing to do whatever it took to get what she wanted, even if it meant tearing me down in the process. I walked away from that conversation more resolved than ever. If Sarah wanted to fight, I was ready. I wasn't just fighting for my rights as a father. I was fighting for Max and Lily's happiness, for the bond we shared, and for the future I knew they deserved. The custody battle had already been brutal, but Sarah's tactics took a darker turn when she began using Max and Lily as pawns. It started subtly, offhand comments she dropped during their time together. "Does your dad ever seem too busy for you?" she'd ask, planting seeds of doubt in their young minds. Max, ever the inquisitive 8-year-old, would bring those questions back to me. "Dad, why don't we see you more?" he asked one night, his tone tinged with confusion. My heart sank. I explained the court proceedings in the simplest terms, assuring him that I wanted to see him and Lily every day if I could. But Sarah wasn't just asking questions. She was twisting their innocent answers to fit her narrative. In court, her lawyer presented statements like, "Max said his dad never has time for him, and Lily feels like her dad is always too distracted." It was a gross distortion of reality, but it was enough to make me feel like the ground beneath me was crumbling. The most devastating moment came when Max began to pull away. He had always been my little shadow, eager to join me in the garage while I worked on projects or chat about his favorite soccer players. But now he seemed distant, almost wary. One evening, as I helped him with his homework, he blurted out, "Mom said you don't want to see us anymore. Is that true?" I froze, my chest tightening as I processed his words. "Max, that's not true at all," I said, keeping my voice as calm as I could. "I love you and Lily more than anything, and I would never want to be away from you." His eyes searched mine, looking for reassurance. Then why did she say that? I didn't have an answer that wouldn't drag him further into the conflict. "Sometimes people say things when they're upset," I said carefully. "But you can always talk to me about how you're feeling, okay? No matter what." Meanwhile, Lily, sweet and sensitive, began crying every time I dropped her off at Sarah's house. "I don't want to go," she'd sob, clinging to me like a lifeline. Each time, it broke me a little more. Sarah's manipulation wasn't just affecting me. It was tearing the kids apart. They were confused and scared, caught in a battle they didn't understand. I tried to shield them as much as I could, focusing on making our time together fun and reassuring. But the cracks were showing, and I felt powerless to stop it. In court, Sarah's lawyer ramped up the attacks. They painted me as neglectful, distant, and incapable of providing a stable home. Every word felt like a calculated move to destroy my credibility as a father. It didn't matter that I'd coached Max's soccer team or helped Lily with every art project. According to Sarah's version of events, I was barely present in their lives. I couldn't believe the woman I had once loved, the mother of my children, could stoop so low. It wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about tearing me down in every way possible. Despite the constant attacks, I refused to give up. I knew the truth, and I knew my kids needed me. My lawyer and I worked tirelessly to counter Sarah's claims, gathering evidence and testimonies from people who knew me as a father. I also started keeping a journal of my time with Max and Lily. Every soccer game, every bedtime story, every moment that proved I was more than the absentee parent Sarah was trying to paint me as. It was exhausting, but I knew it was the only way to fight back. As the custody battle raged on, I clung to one thought. No matter how hard Sarah tried to twist the truth, the bond one had with my kids was real, and it was worth fighting for. Facing Sarah's relentless accusations felt like standing in the middle of a storm with no shelter. I couldn't just rely on my word against hers, not when she was twisting the truth with such precision. If I wanted to protect my relationship with Max and Lily, I needed hard evidence, and I needed it fast. I started documenting everything. Every time Sarah dropped the kids off late or canceled a visit at the last minute, I logged it. If she sent a snarky or contradictory text, I saved it. The messages often betrayed her true intentions, revealing that her accusations in court didn't align with her actual behavior. One text, for example, claimed I was too uninvolved with the kids. Yet another complained that I was hovering and trying too hard. These contradictions became the foundation of my defense. I also began keeping a journal of my time with Max and Lily. Each entry detailed the moments that defined our bond. Helping Max practice for his soccer games, building a pillow fort with Lily on a rainy afternoon, or simply tucking them in at night. The journal wasn't just for the court. It was for me, a reminder of what I was fighting for when things felt overwhelming. Realizing I couldn't do this alone, I reached out to people who could vouch for me as a father. It was humbling to ask for help, but the responses were overwhelming. Max's soccer coach wrote a glowing letter, describing how I never missed a game or practice and how I'd stepped up as a team parent more times than he could count. Lily's teacher was just as supportive. She wrote about how I'd volunteered for every school event I could, from helping with class projects to chaperoning field trips. Her letter painted a clear picture of a father who was present, engaged, and dedicated to his children. Even mutual friends and neighbors chimed in. One neighbor, who had often seen me playing outside with the kids, offered to testify that I was always there for them, rain or shine. Their words didn't just strengthen my case. They reminded me that the truth was on my side, even if it felt buried under Sarah's lies. The most damning evidence, however, came from Sarah herself. As I sifted through months of texts and emails, a pattern emerged. Her accusations in court didn't match her behavior outside of it. She'd claim I was neglectful, but then send messages asking me to take the kids because she was too busy or needed a break. One particularly explosive text exchange became a turning point. She'd accuse me of being too temperamental to care for the kids, but in the messages, she was the one losing her cool, hurling insults and threats. My lawyer said these contradictions would be invaluable in court, showing the judge that Sarah's claims weren't rooted in reality. Still, every court appearance weighed heavily on me. Even with a mountain of evidence, I couldn't shake the fear that Sarah's manipulations might sway the judge. She was charismatic when she wanted to be, spinning stories that painted her as the perfect mother and me as the absent, irresponsible father. But I knew the truth, and I clung to it like a lifeline. I wasn't perfect, no parent is, but I love Max and Lily with every fiber of my being. And I was willing to fight, not just for my rights, but for the stability and love my kids deserved. As the court dates dragged on, my lawyer reminded me to stay focused. This isn't about winning or losing, she said. It's about showing the court what's best for your kids. And you have the truth on your side. Her words gave me strength, but the battle was far from over. Sarah wasn't backing down, and I had a feeling she was preparing to escalate her tactics. Little did she know, her lies were starting to unravel, and the truth was about to come to light. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Sarah escalated the custody battle to an entirely new level. During a court hearing, her lawyer dropped a bombshell. Sarah was accusing me of physically disciplining Max inappropriately. It was an outright lie, but the impact was immediate. The judge, bound by the seriousness of the accusation, temporarily suspended my visitation rights until the matter could be fully investigated. The moment those words were spoken, it felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. I knew the claim was baseless, but that didn't matter. The accusation alone was enough to cast doubt on my character, and suddenly, I was fighting not only for custody, but for my reputation as a father. Max and Lily didn't understand why they couldn't see me anymore. When Max asked Sarah for answers, she fed him more lies. Your dad needs time to figure things out, she told him, spinning the narrative to make it seem like I was the problem. Hearing about this secondhand from mutual friends broke my heart. How could someone weaponize our children like this? The investigation that followed was invasive and exhausting. I was interviewed by social workers and child welfare officials, who scrutinized every detail of my parenting. Max and Lily were also interviewed, and while I knew they would speak the truth, I couldn't help but feel guilty that they had to go through such an ordeal. Meanwhile, my lawyer and I worked tirelessly to disprove the claims. We gathered testimony from neighbors, teachers, and family friends who had witnessed my interactions with the kids. One neighbor, who often saw me playing with Max and Lily in the backyard, described me as patient, kind, and attentive. A family friend wrote a statement recounting how I'd stepped in to comfort Lily during a meltdown at a holiday party, proving my ability to handle parenting challenges calmly and lovingly. Max and Lily's interviews were the most critical pieces of the investigation. When asked about our time together, they spoke candidly about how I cared for them, played with them, and made them feel safe. Max, in his 8-year-old wisdom, even told the investigator, "Dad always says hitting is never okay. He talks to us when we're upset instead." After weeks of stress and uncertainty, the investigation concluded. The report was clear. There was no evidence to support Sarah's claims. The investigator noted that my parenting style was nurturing and respectful, and that the allegations appeared to be unsubstantiated. My lawyer called me the moment she received the report. "They cleared you," she said, her voice filled with relief. "You're getting your visitation rights reinstated." The news brought a wave of relief, but it was bittersweet. While I was grateful to have my name cleared, I couldn't ignore the damage Sarah had done. She had planted seeds of doubt in the court's mind and put our children through unnecessary stress, all in the name of winning custody. Rebuilding my credibility was going to be an uphill battle. The court might have ruled in my favor this time, but Sarah's actions had left scars. Max and Lily, though resilient, were still young and impressionable. I knew it would take time and patience to rebuild their trust fully. Despite everything, I refused to give up. The investigation may have been a nightmare, but it reaffirmed what I already knew. I was a good father, and I wasn't going to let Sarah's lies keep me from my kids. The judge reinstated my visitation rights with a strict warning to Sarah about making unfounded allegations in the future. Still, the damage to my credibility in court lingered, and I had to work even harder to prove that I was the stable, loving parent my kids deserved. I had no idea what Sarah's next move would be, but I was more determined than ever to fight for the truth. Max and Lily deserved better than to be pawns in their mother's games, and I was ready to stand up for them, no matter what it took. The custody battle felt like an endless chess game, with Sarah constantly shifting her strategy. Every court appearance brought new allegations or twisted narratives, but my lawyer was sharp and started to notice something. Sarah's lies didn't add up. In one affidavit, she accused me of being an absent father who worked too much and barely spent time with Max and Lily. Yet, in another, she painted me as a micromanaging, overly controlling parent who didn't give the kids room to breathe. These contradictions weren't just frustrating. They were evidence that her story lacked credibility. We decided to compile every inconsistency, presenting them in court as a timeline of shifting accusations. My lawyer made it clear that Sarah wasn't just confused. She was manipulating the system. The judge took note, and for the first time, I felt like the tide might be turning in my favor. Then came the game changer. The judge ordered a psychological evaluation for both of us. Sarah protested loudly, claiming it was unnecessary and invasive, but the judge remained firm. "This is about the well-being of the children," he said. "If there's any doubt about the parent's capacity to co-parent effectively, we need clarity." I approached the evaluation with a mix of nerves and determination. I had nothing to hide, but I knew how easily Sarah could spin her narrative to make herself look like the perfect parent. During my sessions with the therapist, I spoke openly about my relationship with Max and Lily, my parenting philosophy, and the struggles I'd faced during the custody battle. Meanwhile, Sarah's resistance to the evaluation only raised more red flags. According to the therapist's report, she became defensive when questioned about her allegations and frequently contradicted herself. The therapist noted her tendency to exaggerate and described her as having a manipulative demeanor. It was the first time someone outside of the courtroom had recognized the patterns I'd been dealing with for years. When the therapist's report was presented in court, it was a turning point in the case. The findings painted a clear picture. Sarah's behavior wasn't in the best interest of the kids. The report highlighted her lack of willingness to co-parent and her attempts to alienate me from Max and Lily. My lawyer used the report to reinforce our argument that joint custody was the most stable and fair arrangement for the children. The kids deserve access to both parents, she argued, and the court must prioritize their well-being over any personal grievances. For the first time, I felt like the court was truly listening. Sarah's manipulations, which had once seemed so powerful, were beginning to unravel under the weight of the evidence. But while the evaluation had weakened Sarah's case, it hadn't ended the battle. She was visibly furious during the hearing, her composure cracking as the judge questioned her motives. I could tell she was gearing up for another attack, but for the first time in months, I felt like I had the upper hand. The most important moment came when the judge addressed us directly. Custody arrangements must prioritize the children's needs, not the parents' egos, he said sternly. It's clear that this conflict has caused unnecessary stress for Max and Lily. and that needs to stop immediately. His words were a wake-up call, not just for Sarah, but for me as well. While I knew I was fighting for my kids, I realized I needed to remain vigilant about keeping their needs at the center of everything. As I left the courtroom that day, I felt a renewed sense of hope. The truth was finally coming to light, and I was more determined than ever to show the court and my children that I was the father they deserved. The court had reached a pivotal moment. Max and Lily would have a private conversation with the judge to share their experiences. When my lawyer told me, my stomach churned with anxiety. I trusted my kids, but I also knew how much pressure Sarah had likely put on them. The judge assured both parties that the meeting would be handled delicately. No lawyers, no parents, just him and the kids in a quiet room. Children have a way of cutting through the noise, he said, his tone calm but firm. They'll tell me what they need, not just what they've been told. The day of the meeting, I could barely focus. What if Sarah had convinced them to say I wasn't a good father? What if their words inadvertently gave her more ammunition? All I could do was wait and hope that the bond I'd built with Max and Lily over the years would shine through. When the judge relayed the children's statements later, I felt a wave of relief and pride. Despite the turmoil of the custody battle, Max and Lily had spoken from their hearts. Max told the judge about how I always helped him with his homework, even when it was tough, and how much fun he had during our backyard soccer practice. My dad's always there for my games, he said. He cheers the loudest, even when we lose. Lily, sweet and artistic, had shared our cherished Saturday pancake mornings. Dad lets me pick the shapes, she said, giggling according to the judge. Last time, I made a butterfly, and he made a weird blob, but he said it was a star. The judge noted that the kids hadn't spoken poorly of Sarah, which was a relief. I didn't want them to feel they had to take sides or say something that might hurt their mom. But they had been clear about one thing. They loved me, they needed me, and they cherished the time we spent together. The children's statements were a turning point. For months, Sarah had tried to paint me as an absent, uninvolved parent, but Max and Lily's words shattered that narrative. Their honest and heartfelt accounts left no doubt about the role I played in their lives. The judge commended the kids for their bravery and honesty. He also made a pointed comment in court. It's clear these children benefit from having both parents in their lives. Any effort to diminish one parent's role is not only detrimental, but goes against their best interests. I could see Sarah's composure slipping as the judge spoke. Her face was tense, and she avoided eye contact. The children's words had unraveled her carefully constructed image, exposing the truth in a way no amount of evidence or testimony ever could. For the first time in the custody battle, I felt like I wasn't just defending myself, I was reclaiming my relationship with my kids. Max and Lily had reminded the court of what truly mattered, and I was determined to protect the bond we shared, no matter what came next. The day of the final hearing arrived, and the atmosphere in the courtroom was electric with tension. I had spent months preparing for this moment, poring over documents, organizing testimonies, and reliving every painful detail of the custody battle. Now it all came down to this. Sarah's lawyers started strong, doubling down on the narrative they'd been spinning for months. They reiterated accusations of neglect, claiming I was too distracted by work to prioritize my kids. They painted Sarah as the perfect, devoted mother, contrasting her supposed stability with the chaotic image they tried to create of me. But this time, we were ready. My lawyer stood confidently as she began presenting our evidence, dismantling each of Sarah's claims with precision. Text messages showed her contradictions, court-ordered evaluations revealed her manipulative tendencies, and testimonials from teachers and neighbors painted a clear picture of my involvement in Max and Lily's lives. One by one, Sarah's lies crumbled. My lawyer displayed the timeline of inconsistent statements, pointing out how Sarah had accused me of being both uninvolved and overly controlling, a contradiction that was impossible to ignore. Your Honor, my lawyer said, her voice steady, these inconsistencies highlight a deliberate effort to mislead the court. My client is a dedicated father who has been unjustly maligned throughout this process. The evidence speaks for itself. Then came the therapist's report, which had been ordered after the psychological evaluations. The findings were damning for Sarah. The therapist had noted her exaggerated claims, manipulative behavior, and unwillingness to co-parent. The judge read through the report carefully, his expression unreadable, but I could feel the weight of the moment. Finally, it was Sarah's turn to speak. Her demeanor, once confident and self-assured, had shifted. She stumbled through her defense, repeating claims the evidence had already disproven. The judge's stern expression made it clear he wasn't buying it. When the judge finally addressed us, the courtroom fell silent. His voice was calm, but carried a weight that made every word feel monumental. "Ms. Reynolds," he said, turning to Sarah, "your actions throughout these proceedings have demonstrated a troubling lack of consideration for your children's well-being. The evidence shows a pattern of manipulation and attempts to alienate their father, which has caused unnecessary distress to Max and Lily. This behavior is unacceptable." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "The court's priority is, and always will be, the best interests of the children. They have made it abundantly clear that they value and need their father in their lives. Any attempt to diminish that relationship is not only harmful, but goes against the principles of this court." Hearing those words was like a wave of relief washing over me. For the first time, I felt truly seen, like someone understood the battle I'd been fighting not just for myself, but for my kids. The judge then announced his decision: joint custody, with a clear and equitable schedule that allowed Max and Lily to spend equal time with both parents. He also ordered Sarah to attend co-parenting counseling to address the issues highlighted in the psychological evaluation. As the gavel struck, signaling the end of the hearing, I felt an overwhelming mix of emotions: relief, exhaustion, and a quiet sense of victory. The truth had come out, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the playing field was level. Sarah left the courtroom quickly, her face pale and her usual air of confidence nowhere to be seen. I didn't feel triumphant watching her leave, just a deep sense of gratitude that the fight was finally over. Most of all, I felt hopeful. The bond one shared with Max and Lily had been tested but remained unbroken. Now, I could focus on rebuilding our lives and creating a future where their happiness and stability were the priority. The courtroom was quiet as the judge prepared to deliver his decision. Months of stress, heartache, and sleepless nights had led to this moment. My lawyer gave me a reassuring nod, but my stomach was in knots. I couldn't shake the fear that despite all the evidence, Sarah's manipulations might sway the outcome. When the judge finally spoke, his tone was steady and deliberate. "After careful consideration of the evidence and the testimonies presented, it is clear that the children, Max and Lily, have strong and meaningful relationships with both parents. The court must prioritize their best interests, which includes maintaining these bonds." Then came the ruling: joint custody, with an equal and clearly defined schedule. Max and Lily would spend alternating weeks with me and Sarah, with additional provisions for holidays and special occasions. The judge also mandated co-parenting counseling for both of us to address the communication issues that had contributed to the conflict. Hearing those words felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. After months of battling false accusations and fighting to prove my worth as a father, the truth had prevailed. The judge had seen through Sarah's lies and recognized the importance of my role in Max and Lily's lives. Sarah, however, was visibly furious. Her lawyer whispered something to her, likely advising her to remain composed, but it was clear she wasn't happy. Her carefully constructed narrative had fallen apart, and her credibility in court was in tatters. As we left the courtroom, I caught a glimpse of Sarah's frustration as she stormed out with her lawyer in tow. For a brief moment, I felt a twinge of sympathy. I didn't hate her. I just wished she could have approached this differently for the sake of the kids. The real victory came later that evening when I sat down with Max and Lily to explain what had happened. I kept it simple, focusing on what they needed to know. They would be spending equal time with both of us, and things were going to get better from here on out. Max grinned and said, "So, does that mean we get to do more backyard soccer games, Dad?" "You bet," I said, ruffling his hair. Lily, still holding her favorite stuffed bunny, climbed into my lap and said, "I'm glad we don't have to pick sides." Her words broke my heart and mended it at the same time. It was a reminder of how much they'd endured and how important it was to give them the stability they deserved. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe again. The fight was over, and while co-parenting with Sarah wouldn't be easy, the structure provided by the court order gave me hope. The kids were safe, happy, and surrounded by love, and I was determined to make the most of every moment with them. As I tucked them into bed that night, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for the outcome, but for the lessons I'd learned along the way. This experience had tested me in ways I never imagined, but it had also strengthened my resolve as a father. Max and Lily deserved the best of both of us, and I was committed to giving them exactly that. The road ahead wouldn't be perfect, but it was one I was ready to walk, for them, and for the future we'd build together. Life after the custody battle was far from perfect, but it was finally peaceful. The court's decision provided structure and stability, ensuring that Max and Lily would never again be used as pawns in a fight they didn't ask to be part of. The oversight from the court acted like a safety net, keeping Sarah in check and making it clear that any further manipulations wouldn't be tolerated. Co-parenting with Sarah wasn't easy. There were still tense moments, passive-aggressive remarks during exchanges, and occasional disagreements over scheduling. But with the court's clear custody arrangement in place, there was little room for her to pull the kind of stunts she had during the battle. I focused on maintaining my composure, knowing that Max and Lily's well-being depended on us keeping things as civil as possible. The most important part of all this was seeing Max and Lily thrive. They were back to their happy, energetic selves, no longer burdened by the confusion and stress that had weighed on them during the custody fight. Our bond, though tested, was stronger than ever. Our time together became something I cherished even more deeply. Max and I resumed our soccer practices, and I even volunteered to coach his team full-time. Lily and I continued our Saturday pancake tradition, with her butterfly and star-shaped creations now taking center stage at breakfast. One day, Max pulled me aside after a game and said, "Dad, I'm glad we get to do this again. I missed it." His words made every exhausting moment of the custody battle worth it. Lily, too, seemed to understand the changes in her own way. She would often hug me out of the blue, saying, "I love you, Daddy," in the sweetest, most sincere voice. I'd kneel down, look her in the eyes, and remind her, "I love you more than anything, Lily." The experience of fighting for my kids taught me lessons I'll carry for the rest of my life. It showed me the importance of standing up for what's right, even when the odds seem insurmountable. It reminded me that truth, though sometimes overshadowed, always has a way of coming to light. Sarah's actions, though painful, no longer have power over me. I've moved past the bitterness and resentment, choosing instead to focus on the life I've built with Max and Lily. I'm proud of the father I've become, not perfect, but present, dedicated, and loving. Looking back, I see this journey not as a trial, but as a testament to the strength of the bond one share with my kids. It's a victory no one can take away, and it's one I'll carry with me every time I see their smiles or hear their laughter. The future isn't without its challenges, but I face it with a renewed sense of purpose. My kids are thriving, and I'm at peace knowing I fought for them, loved them fiercely, and never gave up. And for that, I'll always be proud.